With its extremely fast speed and very real element of danger, it's no wonder that Formula One must be strict with the rules. From getting an F1 super license to wearing fireproof clothing every time you're in a race car, there's a lot drivers have to do before starting their engine. If you've seen Netflix hit sports series Formula One Drive to Survive, this is just the beginning. To learn more about all the rules these athletes have to follow, keep watching. The rules dictate how the drivers must behave during the race. For example, F1 is a non-contact sport and drivers cannot push a rival off the track. Each driver must keep at least one wheel within the white line that defines the limits of the track. Other rules are more procedural, such as using 2 sets of tires during the race and keeping enough fuel for the FIA to test an exhibition after the Grand Prix is over. Starting with warnings, which are the least severe penalties a driver can receive. For example, if a driver crosses the track limits during a race, he receives a warning. After receiving a certain number of warnings, they make a time penalty. Meanwhile, managers are allowed 4 reprimands per season and risk a ban of 10 places on the 5th. A reprimand is similar to a warning. For example, Sebastian Vettel received one for an unsportsmanlike offense when he wore a Same Love t-shirt during the 2021 Hungarian Grand Prix. Meanwhile, Yuki Tsunoda received a 5th reprimand of the offending seasoned sports car when he had his seatbelts loose at Zandvoort, causing a serious safety hazard, resulting in a 10-place drop for the next race in Italy. Buckle up for a thrilling ride, the top F1 rules that will blow your mind. F1 drivers must have a super license. A regular driver's license is not enough. F1 drivers must obtain what is called an F1 super license. No, it is not wrong. This is the European spelling issued by the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile, FIA. The license includes an intensive written test and previous racing experience. Some dual national drivers race under a different nationality, such as Alex Albon, who has a Thai license. Must be 18 to compete. This rule is relatively new, having just been introduced for the first time after Max Verstappen's Formula One debut at just 17 in 2015. The age limit helps preserve the elite nature of the sport. Cars and drivers must respect a minimum height. For the 2023 season, the driver and car must weigh at least 796 kilograms, or 1,754 pounds, for safety and speed reasons. Weights are added to the cars when the driver is too light to even the playing field. Drivers must weigh themselves after each race. This allows officials to ensure the car and the driver meet the minimum weight. Another reason? Drivers can lose 4 to 8 pounds during a race due to sweating from high temperatures in the car. They can reach up to 122 degrees Fahrenheit. Weighing allows medical personnel to know how much weight a pilot has lost. If it's more than usual, then they can act like this. Don't worry, riders can hydrate during the race. Some drivers have a special hydration system built into their car. A button on the steering wheel will inject an isotonic sports drink into your mouth, designed to keep you super hydrated. They have to accept grueling travel schedules. F1 drivers should expect to be away from their families for long periods during the season. 2 races in a row means being far away from home for 2 weeks at a time. But the mechanics, engineers, and other crew members have an even tougher life, sometimes with more than 2 months of continuous travel. In 2023, a new rule was introduced to address this problem, reducing the number of working hours on racing weekends. It's not mandatory to travel with the team. Some pilots travel with their crew on commercial flights, business or first class of course, while others charter their own private jets. Or if the race is in the driver's country, they often stay at home and take their cars to the circuit. The hotels are supported by the team. Whether the drivers end up in a 5-star hotel or a short-term rental apartment, the team usually covers all expenses. There's only one way to change your number. At the beginning of their F1 career, drivers must choose a number of permanent races. Their choice often has personal significance. Do you want to change? Only the reigning world champion can move to number 1 after his winning season. Winners don't always keep their trophy. Most only get a replica of their trophy, as managers usually sign a contract with a clause that says their team must keep the real one. Many teams show them at their headquarters. There are no bathroom breaks during the races. Pit stops only last a few seconds. Coaches plan meals and hydration to ensure drivers don't need to go to the bathroom mid-race. In emergencies, pilots are ordered to urinate in their clothes, but this is not very common. They can't be late to meal. Teams often have a kitchen staff that feeds the drivers as well as the crew and guests. The only important thing about the driver's food is that it is served on time, Red Bull boss Sandro Gamsjäger told CNN in 2014. Normally, they eat an hour and a half before getting into the car. Full gear must be worn while driving. Yes, even during testing. This includes a fireproof suit, helmet, neck protection, running boots, and a cap. Oh, and gloves with a biometric sensor on the fingertips so the team can track riders' vital signs in real time, like their heart rate and oxygen levels. Drivers must speak to the press. When you see a driver going straight from the track to the interview, it's not necessarily because they want to. Making it available to the media is mandatory and part of the official rules. A team member records all interviews. This helps prevent misinterpretation of the pilot's comments. These guardians, as they are called, often serve as personal assistants, helping to plan the pilot's busy days. Previously, drivers couldn't interact with fans on social media. In 2017, ownership of Formula One changed hands, and the teams and drivers have been posting messages ever since. He often shares snippets from his workouts and personal life. Victory celebrations are allowed. That said, donuts are really hard on the machine. Teams have a limited number of components they are allowed to use per year, so most drivers don't pull off winning tricks until the last race of the season. But dangerous tricks are not allowed. Only a party conducted in complete safety and which does not endanger the leaders or other officials is authorized. When Max Verstappen won the Styrian Grand Prix in 2021, his burnout, i.e. slowing down and burning his rear tires, earned him a stern warning from F1 race director Michael Masi because the cars were still behind him and driving at racing speed. It is not recommended to listen to music. Although there is no written rule against it, it's not surprising that no pilot does it. For safety reasons, this would also affect the pilot's ability to hear the team's radio communications. Teammates cannot talk to each other during competitions. Once the drivers are on the track, it becomes an individual sport, and thus they cannot talk to each other during a race. The solution? Teammates can pass messages through their team's race engineer. With the fastest cars, spectacular facilities, and high-octane action, it's no wonder that more and more fans flock to Formula One every year. However, F1 is a highly technical sport that can seem overwhelming to a newcomer trying to get started and understand its rules and regulations. It's easy for everyone to watch F1, but with a little more understanding of the rules, watching quickly turns into appreciation, enjoyment, and counting down the hours until the next race. Each Grand Prix starts with a practice lap where the drivers go around the circuit at a slower speed than usual before lining up on the starting grid. After the last racer has taken his seat on the starting position, 5 red lights above the starting line are illuminated in sequence to mark the start of the race. When all 5 lights go out simultaneously, the Grand Prix begins. The time between the lighting of each fire is the same, but each time there is a random delay between the lighting of the 5th fire and the extinguishing of all the lights. This difference means that the driver's reaction time is crucial to gain an advantage over his opponents. Each Formula One race weekend consists of 5 sessions that spread over 3 days. The first 2 on Friday and the other 2 on Saturday before the Grand Prix final on Sunday. In 2024, 3 race weekends will start one day before each other, namely the Bahrain Grand Prix, the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, and the Las Vegas Grand Prix. Each of them will take place from Thursday to Saturday. Free practice. Free practice allows drivers to discover and familiarize themselves with the track and try different car configurations during non-competitive sessions on Friday and Saturday. A standard race weekend includes 3 free practice sessions of 1 hour each, with 2 on Friday and 1 on Saturday before qualifying. Some race weekends will host a shorter race called a sprint, detailed below. These weekends only have 2 free practice sessions, 1 on Friday and 1 on Saturday. Qualification. The first competitive session of a weekend is qualifying. 1 hour of driving determines the starting order of the race. Drivers try to set the fastest lap times on the circuit that hosts the Grand Prix, with the fastest starting the race on the front and the slowest at the back of the pack. The qualification takes place in 3 sessions, Q1, Q2, and Q3. Q1 lasts 18 minutes, Q2 lasts 15 minutes, and Q3 lasts 12 minutes with a break of 7 and 8 minutes between each session to save an hour. At the end of Q1, the 5 slowest drivers are eliminated and start the race according to their lap times. The slowest drivers start from 20th place, and the second in 19th place, and so on. In Q2, the times recorded in Q1 are deleted and the process is repeated for the remaining 15 drivers. Finally, Q3 sees the remaining 10 competitors compete in a head-to-head race to set the fastest time, with the fastest drivers able to start the race from first place, commonly known as pole position. Sprint. Introduced in 2021, the sprint is a short race of 100 kilometers that replaces the third free practice session of some race weekends. In 2024, 6 sprint events were planned in China, Miami, Austria, United States in Austin, Texas, Brazil, and Qatar. The sprint weekend format features a condensed qualifying session on Friday afternoon before the sprint race itself on Saturday morning. There's no mandatory milestones during a sprint. The FIA indicated that significant sanctions could be imposed in the future for the offense, which resulted in 4 F1 drivers being called up by the stewards after the Azerbaijan Grand Prix. Max Verstappen, Nico Hülkenberg, and Alpine duo Esteban Ocon-Pierre Gasly were all charged with breaching virtual safety car (VSC) rules after the checkered flag in Baku. While the race in Baku ended under VSC, due to the crash of Carlos Sainz and Sergio Perez in the penultimate lap, overtaking in the recovery lap, which is common under normal circumstances, was not authorized. However, all 4 pilots were convicted. None of these low-speed overtakes took place near the scene of the incident between Ferrari and Red Bull. However, the marshals disputed this negligence because they could not have known whether emergency crews or marshals were dispatched to the track, according to the decision documents. Sometimes drivers receive a pit stop penalty, in which they have to cross the pit lane and join the rest of the race. Or in other words, they are hit with a stop-and-go penalty of 10 seconds, in which they must stop, wait 10 seconds, do not work on the car, and re-enter the race. Grid penalties are usually given when drivers change engine components more often than the time allowed. Charlie Leclerc was in pain when he received a 10-grid penalty for the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix after changing the control electronics twice, while only 2 were allowed for the entire season. While he qualified second, he had to drop another 10 places and start 12th for the race. Disqualification is a more severe sanction imposed when a driver commits a serious offense. For example, Sebastian Vettel was disqualified from the 2021 Hungarian GP after securing second place because Aston Martin failed to provide the required fuel sample for the race, meaning the FIA could not check whether his car used legal fuel. Romain Grosjean, Lotus E20, is launched on Fernando Alonso Ferrari F2012. The most severe sanction a driver can receive, which only occurs in extreme circumstances, is suspension from several races. In the last 40 years, only 6 drivers have been suspended, Romain Grosjean being the last. The Frenchman was suspended for the 2012 Italian GP after causing several accidents this season, culminating at Spa where he collided with Lewis Hamilton early in the race, losing a braking point and taking out several drivers. If the drivers are more likely to receive penalties, the team may also receive a sanction. If a team is guilty of cheating in any way, they will likely face a large fine and other penalties. For example, when Red Bull was found guilty of not meeting the maximum cost in 2021, it was forbidden to use the wind tunnel for aerodynamic testing before the 2023 season. Meanwhile, Aston Martin will pay $450,000 to minor criminals. Cost limit. Another famous incident was Crashgate in 2008, when Renault was guilty of deliberately crashing Nelson Piquet Jr. into a wall at turn 17 in Singapore and allowing Fernando Alonso to take the victory after a pit stop. The Spaniard did better after a difficult year, but failed to challenge for pole that weekend when a fuel problem forced him out of Q2. The matter has kept quiet for some time, but in 2009, Piquet was fired from Renault and appeared before the FIA to testify that Flavio Briatore and Pat Simons had asked him to crash to take out the safety car and allow Alonso to win. In the event, Briatore was banned from F1 for life, Simons for 5 years, while Renault suffered financially when sponsor ING withdrew. The team also received a suspended 2-year ban. Penalties can also be applied during practice sessions, qualifying, or sprint races, and the driver will finally have to face his fate in Sunday's race. Minor infractions are usually investigated after the race so that the stewards are not distracted from important matters. For the teams, however, it is a completely different story, as they must submit detailed documents regarding matters such as finance or car construction. If the FIA discovers that something is not in accordance with the rules, it will launch a more thorough investigation, which will be subject to several evaluations, will examine the submitted report in more detail, ask for other relevant information, and finally decide if there are any that were a violation. Sometimes, as in the case of Crashgate, the attention of the FIA drawn to the driver or the team leader. Another example is the pink Mercedes of Racing Point in 2020. Technical director Andrew Green said that the team had tried to adapt more to the basic architecture that we took from MGP, Mercedes, and develop a Red Bull philosophy. The team did not want to deviate from what Mercedes does, produce a championship car, and the FIA was forced to intervene as the other teams were unhappy. And so the regulator launched an investigation on a set of brake pipes rear of the Mercedes, which was changed from a listed and legal part to a non-listed and illegal part from the 2020 season, and as punishment were penalized 15 manufacturer points and a fine of 400,000 euros. Pierre Gasly, Alpine A523. When a driver is penalized, they accumulate penalty points on their super license. This license is mandatory for drivers who want to compete in F1. First introduction in the 1990s before being modified in recent years. Points are earned by competing in different series, and the better a driver performs, the more points they earn. However, his license can be subject to penalty points. And when the number of points reaches 12 in a 12-month period, he is automatically suspended for one race. The FIA implemented this system to prevent dangerous driving. The motorsport regulator said stewards would take a more considerate approach to handing out penalties in 2023, so a driver is not at risk of being suspended for minor offenses. This is what happened in Bahrain, where they imposed sports sanctions without penalty points. The move came from Pierre Gasly complaining that he was on the brink of a 10-point suspension for minor offenses. He said, "It's a very uncomfortable and quite delicate situation. It's a bit embarrassing to find myself in a situation where I could be banned. After the season I had, I didn't feel particularly dangerous in the last 12 months, and it will certainly be a heavy sanction." Drivers and teams may feel they have been wrongly penalized and may appeal the decision to the FIA. A recent example is that of Fernando Alonso in Saudi Arabia. The Spaniard dropped to 4th place after receiving a 10-second penalty when the stewards ruled that a rear jack was in illegal contact with the car while serving another penalty for a starting grid offense. Aston Martin appealed the decision, saying that while the car had been hit, no one had started working. The FIA agreed, and Alonso's post-race penalty was overturned, allowing him to regain 3rd place. The rules and penalties in Formula One play a crucial role in maintaining fairness, safety, and competition in the sport. While the regulations are intended to promote skillful driving and responsible behavior on the tracks, these sanctions serve to prevent violations of the rules and ensure that all teams and drivers meet the standards set by the governing body. Adhering to a strict code of conducting and applying sanctions where necessary, Formula One continues to evolve to become the pinnacle of motorsports excellence, stunning fans around the world with its blend of speed, strategy, and suspension.